If you could travel back to the 6th century BCE Greece, step into a farming village, and ask the local woman to brew a love potion or cast a spell to heal your fever, she would look at you with total confusion, not because she couldn't do it, but because to her world, the word magic did not exist. In the archaic era, everything existed under one massive, natural umbrella. From interacting with the gods, to treating an infection, or singing an incantation, these were all parts of the same unified science. They all worked within the forces of a living cosmos. The acts themselves did not carry a dark taint. The legendary father of medicine, Asclepius, balanced both surgery and potions with what the poet Pindar called gentle healing songs. The root cutters of archaic Greece were harvesting natural medicines, and incantations, or epidai, were considered perfectly effective remedies to soothe pain and bleeding. The goes, singing their mournful songs for the restless dead, was just a normal part of a funeral, and pharmakeia, or herbalism, was completely ordinary. Granted, there was always some intellectual skepticism. Around 500 BCE, a grumpy philosopher named Heraclitus blasted the logic of street-level ritualists who claimed that they could manipulate the universe. He wrote, "Night walkers, magi, bacchanals, revelers, mystery initiates. These he threatens with fire after death. For the mysteries practiced among men are initiated in an unholy manner." To Heraclitus, these people were just scammers. But soon, a massive geopolitical trauma would turn this mild skepticism into an all-out cultural panic. Enter the Persian Wars. In 490 BCE, Darius the Great invaded the Greek mainland, only to be turned back at Marathon. But 10 years later, his son Xerxes marched a colossal army into Greece and burned Athens to the ground. Against all the odds, the Greeks fought back, and by 479 BCE, the Persians were decisively expelled. Greece had survived, but the trauma of the invasion had mutated their culture, birthing an intense, paranoid hatred of anything foreign, Eastern, or exotic. The Greeks took the sacred title of the Persian fire priests, Magos, and weaponized it into a devastating political slur. Magos became the root of our modern word for magic. Following the war, an influx of refugees and travelling holy men flooded Greece. Some claimed to possess the dark secrets of the East, offering nighttime purifications and strange rituals for a price. The Greeks started to view these wandering figures with immense suspicion. To the authorities, this felt like another Persian invasion, but this time it was insidious, deceptive. It was an onslaught from within. This paranoia rippled outwards, causing established, centuries-old traditions to suddenly fall under scrutiny. Decades earlier, the city of Athens had tried to domesticate the wild cult of Dionysus by bringing it into the city as a regulated daytime festival. But now, any private, non-normative practice taking place outside the civic designated procedures was condemned. The ecstatic, frenzied nocturnal ceremonies of Dionysus were suddenly compared to the subversive foreign influence of the Persians. We see this exact shift play out on stage in Euripides' tragedy, The Bacchae. There, the cult of Dionysus is described by the paranoid king Pentheus as a fake foreign ritual led by a Lydian sorcerer who lures women away from their households into secret, lustful revelry. But the ultimate turning point happened in March of 472 BCE, just 7 years after the Persian expulsion. The citizens of Athens gathered to watch a play by Aeschylus entitled The Persians. On stage, Aeschylus gave the public exactly what their paranoia had craved. He staged a scene wherein the Persian queen mother pours blood into the earth, while a chorus chants a rhythmic, haunting song to violently pull the ghost of King Darius from his grave. When the ghost finally arises from the soil, the play described their spell in similar terms to the traditional practice of funeral wailing. This was the exact moment the archetype of the necromancer was born in Western history. The Greeks took their own traditional funeral wailing, slapped a foreign Persian twist on it, and reframed it as a forbidden art that could violate the boundaries of death. From this point forward, the word goes and goetia were identical to wizards and sorcery. In a massive cultural retcon, the changing Greek mind looked backwards at its own mythology. The traditional root cutters and the ancient goddesses who used herbs in Homer were retroactively stripped of their innocence. They were officially rebranded as history's first wicked, deceptive, and diabolical witches. By the closing years of the 5th century BCE, the lines were drawn. Magic had become a distinct, abhorred craft, and the stage was set for the ultimate non-conformists to emerge, the moon stealers of Thessaly. If you sail north from Athens past the narrow pass of Thermopylae, the rugged Greek mountains suddenly split open into a massive, eerie basin. This is Thessaly, a giant plain locked in by a ring of towering, mist-shrouded peaks. Mount Olympus to the north, Mount Othrys to the south, and Mount Pelion to the east. While southern Greece was rocky and dry, Thessaly's volcanic soil was fiercely fertile, choked with dense, untamed forests and wetlands. It was a landscape of extremes, constantly plagued by heavy mists and thunderstorms. To the urban Athenians, this closed-off, shadow-casting basin felt like a completely different world, a wild, primeval borderland where the boundary between Earth and the underworld was dangerously thin. This unique landscape was a dream for the botanist. The mountains of Thessaly, particularly Mount Pelion, were renowned across the Mediterranean as a giant natural pharmacy. In mythology, this was the home of Chiron the centaur, who used these very mountain slopes to gather the herbs that taught humanity the secrets of healing. But where there is medicine, there is also poison. Throughout Greece, and among the neighbouring northern tribes, the Thessalians became absolute masters in psychotropic plants, toxic roots, and herbal decoctions known as pharmaca. Because Thessaly stayed isolated from the democratic evolution of southern Greece, retaining a feudal society dominated by wealthy horse-breeding aristocrats, the Athenians viewed them with intense cultural disdain. To the sophisticated south, Thessalians were uneducated, excessive, and deeply superstitious. They took Thessaly's ancient worship of chthonic cemetery goddesses, combined it with their terrifying mastery of poisonous plants, and created a legendary archetype, the Thessalian witch. By the late 5th century BCE, the stereotype was so deeply entrenched that it became a running punchline in Athenian pop culture. The oldest surviving mention of their specific power comes from the comic playwright Aristophanes in his play The Clouds. Here, a desperate debtor named Strepsiades proposes a hilariously dark solution to his financial ruin. He writes, "If I were to buy a Thessalian witch and draw down the moon from the sky, then shut it up in a round box like a mirror and keep it safe, I wouldn't have to pay any interest because the months would not change." But drawing down the moon was no joke to the Greeks. It was believed to disrupt the balance of nature itself. The philosopher Plato, writing around 380 BCE, warned that the cosmic backlash for practicing this magic was devastating. He noted that the gods brutally punished those who dared to rip the moon from her orbit. He writes, "As they say of the Thessalian women who draw down the moon, their curse falls upon themselves. For this attempt to rob the sky costs them either their sight, their limbs, or the lives of their children." What exactly were these women doing? To the wider Greek public, the Thessalian witches were performing nocturnal, ecstatic ceremonies. Standing in dark clearings or ancient cemeteries, they would unbind their hair, bare their feet, and sing guttural, rhythmic incantations directly into the night sky. The moon would supposedly begin to tremble, turning blood red or deathly pale, before dripping a toxic, glowing foam known as moon spittle onto the grass below. The witches would eagerly scrape up the celestial residue to brew their most lethal love potions and curses. But behind the terrifying myth lay a fascinating historical reality. Around 100 CE, the historian Plutarch pulled back the curtain on who these women actually were, revealing the historical figure of Aglaonike of Thessaly, who lived around the 2nd century BCE. He writes, Aglaonike, the daughter of Erichtho of Thessaly, was thoroughly acquainted with the eclipses of the moon, and knowing beforehand the time when the moon was about to be overtaken by the earth's shadow, she would deceive the simple women of the village into believing that she herself was drawing down the moon. Aglaonike was not a sorceress. She was an extraordinarily brilliant early astronomer. By mastering the Babylonian mathematical models, she could predict lunar eclipses down to the exact minute. But in the highly paranoid and superstitious landscape of post-war Greece, advanced scientific knowledge looked indistinguishable from black magic. She had weaponized her education, convincing her neighbors that she was literally commanding the heavens. The terrifying reputation of the Thessalian witches did not stop at stealing the moon. In the ancient imagination, these women were cosmic rebels capable of tearing the fabric of reality apart. Ancient writers accuse them of using their chanted spells or epidai to reverse the flow of raging rivers, freeze the winds, shatter solid rocks, and make entire fields of crops wither and rot overnight. But their most intimate and feared power was that over the human mind. They were accused of brewing mind-altering love filters that could reduce proud, rational men into groveling, brain-dead slaves. They were masters of pharmakeia, using toxic nightshades, hemlock, and mandrake to induce madness, manufacture phantom hallucinations, or cause a victim's hair and skin to waste away. This wasn't just a myth told to scare children. Sometimes it was used to win wars. Take the incredible Count of Chrysame of Thessaly, recorded in the 2nd century by military historian Polonius. During the early archaic migrations, a group of Ionian Greeks laid siege to the city of Erichtho. The Thessalians, facing annihilation, did not rely on swords. They relied on Chrysame, a high priestess of the chthonic goddess Enodia. Chrysame was an expert in the chemical properties of Thessaly's mountain herbs. She selected a massive, beautiful bull from the herd, gilded its horns with gold, and draped it in sacrificial garlands. But hidden beneath the flowers, she injected the bull's flesh with a devastating, fast-acting psychotropic drug that caused intense madness and wild, explosive fury. She sent the drugged bull charging straight towards the enemy's lines. The Ionians, seeing a magnificent decorated sacrificial animal running towards them, assumed it was a direct blessing from the gods. They captured the bull, slaughtered it, and greedily cooked and ate its meat. Within hours, the toxin took hold. The entire Ionian army descended into a state of raving, delirious madness. They began hallucinating, turning on one another, and abandoning their guard posts. Seizing the moment, Chrysame gave the signal. The Thessalian army swept down upon the camp and utterly annihilated the incapacitated invaders. It remains one of the earliest recorded examples of chemical and psychological warfare in human history, masked as a religious sacrifice. To the sophisticated citizens of Athens, stories like Chrysame's were proof that Thessaly was a backward land of unhinged, dangerous non-conformists. But if you strip away the Athenian propaganda, you'll uncover a bizarre, hypocritical double standard. The Athenians weren't actually horrified by the acts themselves. They were horrified because the Thessalians did them outside the control of the state. The truth is, the average Athenian lived a life completely saturated in what we would call magic. If an Athenian businessman wanted to ruin a rival, he would write a binding curse, a katadesmos, on a lead tablet, pierce it with a nail, and bury it in a graveyard to summon the dead. If an Athenian fell ill, they sang healing incantations. If the city faced a plague, they brought in ritual purifiers to wash away the spiritual filth. The entire Greek religious system was built on the exact same core concepts as Thessalian witchcraft, manipulating supernatural forces through ritual action. So why the intense hatred for Thessaly? It all came down to normative values. In Athens, ritual was safe because it was public, institutionalized, and civic. A sacrifice was performed in broad daylight on an altar paid for by the government, led by an elected magistrate. Following ancient civil laws, it served the community. The Thessalian witch shattered this entire civic structure. She operated in absolute secrecy, in the dead of night, in private forests or hidden tombs. She did not pray to the Olympian gods for the good of the city. She commanded the chthonic gods for her own private gain, or for whoever paid her a fee. She bypassed the priests, bypassed the politicians, and bypassed the laws. To the democratic Athenian mind, a person who could privately command the moon, or poison an army with herbs possessed and unmonitored absolute power that no democracy could tolerate. The Thessalian witch wasn't hated because her rituals were fake. She was hated because her power was terrifyingly real, fiercely independent, and entirely out of their control. If you think calling these women cosmic rebels is an exaggeration, you only need to look at the survival of the actual Roman texts. The ancient world left us an explicit trail of receipts. The poet Ovid in his Metamorphosis, explicitly tracks the terrifying ability of Thessalian magic to manipulate agriculture, weather, and geology. He writes, "By my incantations, the winds are stilled, and the winds are raised. I break the jaws of serpents with my spells. I command the solid rocks to split, the ancient oaks to be torn from the earth, and the forests to move down the mountainside." And what about their horrifying power to induce madness, or melt away the human body with love philters? The Roman poet Horace provides a grim warning in his Epodes, describing the witch Canidia using Thessalian toxic potions to construct love curses so severe that they completely liquefied the internal organs of her victims, driving men to a state of hollow, drooling insanity. But all of these literary claims were merely a warm-up act. By the middle of the 1st century, the Roman elite's fascination with Thessalian horror was about to culminate in the creation of the most gruesome, blasphemous, and unhinged witch in human history, a creature who didn't just bend the laws of nature, she actively defiled them. Within the unhinged reign of Emperor Nero, the poet Lucan wrote an epic masterpiece entitled Thessalia. It detailed the bloody civil war between Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great. In Book 6, on the eve of the decisive battle on the plains of Thessaly, Pompey's terrified son, Sextus, decides he cannot wait for the Olympian gods to reveal his fate. He wants answers immediately, and he knows exactly where to look. He seeks out Erichtho, the ultimate manifestation of the Thessalian witch archetype. Lucan explicitly describes Erichtho as a social reject who completely bypasses normal society. She is thin, deathly pale, and filthy. Her matted hair is crowned with live vipers. She refuses to live in a human home, choosing instead to inhabit abandoned tombs, caves, and smoking execution grounds. Her very presence is a biological weapon. Lucan writes that her footsteps instantly blight fertile cornfields, and her breath poisons the air. But Erichtho doesn't just draw down the moon. She practices necromancy at an apocalyptic scale. Lucan describes her pacing through the battlefields like a vulture, eagerly defiling fresh corpses. He writes, "She vents her anger eagerly on the limbs, thrusting her fingers deep into the eye sockets, scooping out the solidified eyeballs in delight, and gnawing the yellowed nails on withered hands. She cuts the fatal noose of the hanged with her teeth, and laps up the black fluid from rotting bowels." Sextus Pompey finds her in a dark cave and begs her to tell him who will win the war. Erichtho agrees. She wanders out onto a recent battlefield, selects a fresh corpse with intact lungs, and drags it into her cavern. To force the soul back into the dead flesh. She doesn't sing a gentle healing song. She brews a horrific chemical cocktail made of bubbling hot blood, the foam of rabid dogs, the entrails of lynxes, and the venomous herbs gathered from the highest peaks of Thessaly. She pours this toxic venom directly into the corpse's open wounds. Then she unleashes her incantation, a chaotic, ear-splitting roar where she mimics the howling of wolves, the screeching of owls, the hissing of snakes, and the sound of breaking waves. She commands the underworld gods, threatening to break open the gates of Tartarus and expose the secrets of the dead to the blinding sun if they do not obey her. The spell works. The dead soldier's blood warms. His cold heart gives a violent thud. The corpse violently snaps upright, its pale eyes bursting open. But instead of speaking with a human voice, the reanimated dead man groans out a terrifying prophecy. Rome will fall into ruin. The underworld is weeping, and the ghosts of the past are preparing to drag the living down into the dirt. With Erichtho, the transformation was complete. Across 500 years, the independent, natural practices of the archaic root cutters and funeral wailers had been utterly twisted by political trauma, xenophobia, and literary sensationalism. The Greeks invented the concept of magic to demonize their enemies after the Persian Wars. The Romans transformed it into a gothic horror genre to express their deep anxieties about chaos and death. And at the absolute center of it all stood the non-conformists, the independent women who refused to obey the laws of the state, the laws of the gods, or the boundaries of the grave. They were the moon stealers, the chemical warriors, the necromancers, and they ensured that the name of Thessaly would forever echo throughout history as the undisputed birthplace of the witch. Thank you for joining me through the deep dark of Thessaly. Please leave your comments below and don't forget to subscribe. This has been the Arcane Lantern. Until next time, keep your lights burning.